Well, good morning, friends. I have something very exciting to share today. This is something that people have been asking me about for a very long time, and I just haven't had the time to put it together with the school year running. Now, being the summer, I've been able to sit down and prepare some infographics, and what I am basically referring to is a material farming guide, or essentially an infographic to help players figure out the best use of each of their currency. But with that said, let's just jump right into it. Before we begin, I want to point out that I have seen multiple infographics that look like mine in the past, and there have been things that I don't necessarily agree with. And many of these infographics are not as expansive as the one I've put together. I am not going to tell you that this will apply to every single situation, but the goal of the infographic that you are going to see in just a moment is really to think about an end game player or somebody nearing the end game. So I would like to stipulate that if you are an early game account, you are probably still going to be buying shards or still going to be buying gear for your characters in order to level them up. But that doesn't necessarily mean that this isn't still a great video for you for two reasons. Number one, each currency has a different timeline for where it starts to drop off in the game and become less useful from a growth standpoint, and more useful from an end game standpoint. And number two, it is going to help you build best practices and understand the types of deals you should be looking for as you go forward. So let's jump in. We have the infographic on the screen. I know that it looks really small. Don't worry, I actually chopped it up as well, and we'll use the chopped up version while going through this video. But before we talk about each currency, I do want to point out my infographic key, because this is going to be important to understand why I've put things the way that they are. So that green arrow is essentially going to mean that even though I feel like the item previous might be of a slightly higher priority, that it's okay to mix and match between those two tiers, right? So if you buy something from tier one and you buy something from tier two, not a big deal at all. That yellow hold arrow essentially means don't move on to the next tier unless you're at a point where your hoard of materials is comfortable for where you are in the game. So, as an example, as an end game player, I want about 5 to 10 characters worth of servo motors in my account before I start buying relic 8, 9, and flawed signal data from Era currency. Now, I already have that in my account, so I'm primarily going to shift into the next level and kind of avoid those servo motors and move on to Relic 8, Relic 9, and again, flawed signal data. That blue limit arrow essentially means that make sure you have maximized your ability from the tiers before it. A great example of this would be conquest shards, and making sure that you have gotten all of the applicable conquest shards that you need before you move on to the next tier. Or make sure that you no longer need the tier before it anymore before you move on to the next tier. And that red arrow effectively is things that look like they may be really high value because they are a limiting item, but that item is also significantly overvalued with that currency and would be a mistake to purchase. So that's the arrows and what I want you to keep in mind. And then we see the red brackets afterwards. You will see throughout this infographic that there are some items without those brackets. Those mean that you are buying those items specifically to use as the item. The brackets mean that you are buying these items specifically to use in the scavenger. This will come up in the infographic because, as an example, um, your GAC, your championship currency, I highly recommend people buy Chirotech from that currency, but only while they need Chirotech for gearing. Once you are starting to use Chirotech for droid brains or for arrow magnifiers, that's where you want to move on and say, hey, I'm going to be purchasing mod material with that currency. And you'll understand that as we see in the infographic going forward. So starting with our raid currencies, we have here our MK1, MK2, and MK3. Your first priority is going to be making sure that you are able to get your hollow projectors and turn them into full hollow projectors in order to turn them into Relic 5 materials. Your second priority is going to be your circuit boards and your bronzium wiring. Now, I am at a point where I no longer need to worry about those things. I have such a big hoard, and essentially, I am only purchasing mod material. Sometimes I will buy random things with MK1 because I cannot get mod material that I need fast enough to burn the currency, and that is just something to keep in mind. With my MK2, I prioritize that Relic 6 Electrium Conductor over the Zimbital Crystal because I do need more of it, and sometimes I get to points where I'm only buying Relic 6 material. Once I have enough of both of those things, I'm really starting to think about impulse detectors and Gerda keypads with my Raid 2 in order to make sure I can get characters from Relic 8 all the way to Relic 10. And then finally, with my MK3, arrow magnifiers are my most important. Once I feel like I'm very good on those, I am going to my impulse detectors. Once I feel like, hey, I'm really good on those, I'm going to my Gerda keypads. I am never buying Zetas from this currency. They are way, way, way overpriced for Raid 3, and I am never buying corrupted signal data. There are much better ways to get my corrupted signal data finished. Moving on to the next set, we have my guild currencies, and you'll see at the top we have our activity coins. At first, I'm going with my Blast Tech weapon mods for chromium transistors. We then have our option to get bronzium wiring. There is also our hollow projectors. And once you've gotten past this point here, I'm really looking for my mod materials. There is nothing else there that you're going to need unless you are again at a point where you are actually stuck on gearing, but that is not what we're talking about when we look at this video. With my Get One, I am purchasing all the items for impulse detectors. I run out of this so fast that there is never an option to buy anything else. With my Get Two, I am going to prioritize my Gerda keypads and trying to make sure that I have enough through the G12 gear. Primarily, if that ever happens, I can also buy droid brains from the Chirotech, the stun guns, and the shock prods, sorry, and the battle computers. I personally do not purchase these things, but I do feel like they are worth it. And once again, when you feel pretty comfortable here, you do have the option of buying gray signal data, and I do buy that every once in a while. With my Get 3, I am prioritizing impulse detectors over Gerda keypads. They are much, much, much more important to me, and I want to make sure that I have enough of them. Once I've moved past my Gerda keypads, that is the only time that I am buying mod material here with Get 3. I know that there are some players that disagree with me, but my thought process here is I don't want to spend a very premium currency, my Get 3, on the chance of an upgrade when I can actually spend it on actually getting an upgrade. Where we want to be careful with Get 3 is I never really want to buy Chirotech with Get 3. It is way, way, way too expensive, and I really never want to buy that green signal data. I understand that it is so very tempting for you. I get it, but it is disgustingly expensive and it is not worth it. Moving on to some of our other currencies here, we have our era currency or episode currency rather. And obviously, how far you can go here depends on if you're buying the episode pass. If you are not an episode pass purchaser, you are almost definitely only going to be able to get those Omicrons. If you are an episode pass purchaser, you know that there are a ton of extra ways you can use your episode currency. If you are a super far end game account and you have no more need for Omicrons, of course you can skip those. But my priority here is Omicrons into signal data, into these mod materials right here, which are the ones that I end up losing out on the quickest, into these mod materials right here, which I tend to be able to stock up on and not have to worry about as much because I want to be more selective about the mods at MK6 and above. And don't forget about actually buying mods with era currency. It is a great way, episode currency. It is a great way to spend some of that episode currency if you find something great in the mod shop. And I am always purchasing literally daily because of how cheap it is. Going into our era currency, the first thing we have here is the Lightspeed tokens, and this is a contentious choice because as you get to the end game, you obviously don't need these anymore. I have about 20 characters left who need Lightspeed tokens, and I'm not going to purchase them because I can just get them from the journey guide, and none of those characters are that important. As I move through and as I get Kyber Lightspeed tokens for free, I am just going to build up those characters. So this is primarily for an earlier or mid-game account who is still really farming. And that's why we're using the green arrow here to suggest moving into the servo motors for Relic 10. Once again, I like to have between 5 and 10 characters worth of servo motors. And once I have hit that point, I am purchasing all of these things for lower end high relics. Flawed signal data for me is the least valuable of those items, but it is still important. And if CG keeps giving as much era currency as they are, I do find that, hey, I am able to purchase that. Moving into our ultimate currency from having Galactic Legends, your first priority is Omicrons. And I'm using that blue arrow there to denote this because you should not be buying anything else ever with this currency unless you have every useful Omicron in the game. Once you get there, you can buy the Attenators. I would not purchase them otherwise, and I'd really stay clear of that gray signal data and ever considering using the Kyrotech for droid brains. Moving into our championship currency, you'll notice there are no brackets here for the Kyrotech. Only really buy Kyrotech here if you are still gearing things. You need to get through your finishers. You have journey guide characters that are still going to need this. After that, I am buying only mod materials all day, every day. As you start to get into the end game, you will see why that becomes important. For my shard shop currency, these MK6 med packs become really important, and depending on what your spending level is, you will always have a need for them. If you are a big spender and you're moving all era characters to relic levels right from the start, maybe you will never need a med pack again, and that's why we're kind of denoting the green arrow here for your impulse detectors and your Gerda keypads, which I see as being on the same level here, which is why there's no arrow between them. With med packs, you are going to need them going into the end game. But again, if you are a big spender, you are going to find a point where that caps off. If you are a smaller spender and you still need to bring characters from G12 to G13, you may never need to purchase them again, and that's going to be a personal choice. Pushing through over here to my conquest currency, obviously your first thing is going to be shards first and always. Once I've gotten past those shards, I am buying blue signal data as much as I possibly can, and then moving into green signal data if I happen to have extra, though it is rare that I ever have extra. And last but not least, we have our energies. Your regular energy should always be going towards shock prods for droid brains. Yes, you could do battle computers, but the shock prod node also has a great item for bronzium wiring. So it does help to alleviate that gate if you haven't alleviated that already. For my Cantina currency, my priority, and I do want to stress and stipulate that as of right now, I am always farming on Cantina 9. But my first priority is always going to be blue signal data. Sometimes that is on 9F, which I believe is the node that has blue green. Sometimes it's on 9D, which is the node that has blue white. Over the last couple of days, I've noticed my gray signal data getting low, and I've been farming 9D. My second priority is obviously that green signal data, and I'm not farming for white specifically unless I feel comfortable with these two nodes and where they're at. Now, you may notice that I have green and gray here in the back for corrupted signal data, and you might be thinking, well, Egg, that doesn't make sense because you have a priority for green and you have a priority for white. I keep interchanging white and gray. You have a priority for green, you have a priority for gray, but now you have a separate priority for building them into corrupted signal data. The reason I have done that is that if you feel like you are hoarding at a good variety here, I know some people like Cantina 8, they like the more targeted farm. I believe that these are the two targets for specifically moving into corrupted signal data. Players should never be taking blue signal data, even though it looks to be like it is more efficient because of the drop rates. It is not. Now, for your ship energy, that first priority is going to be med packs. I've surpassed that priority. I don't need med packs anymore. I am going to be focusing on my Gerda keypads right here. Right now, typically I am farming fusion furnaces or data pads. It really doesn't matter to me. I just kind of throw those battles on and go from there. With all of this said, keep in mind that everybody has their own sensibilities when it comes to farming. And depending on your spending levels, you may notice, hey, I don't actually need this farm because I've spent so much money there. This infographic is intended to serve as an overall guide when it comes to the point in the game where you're starting to think, hey, I don't have a short-term target anymore. How should I be prioritizing and be putting my energy in to maximize what I am doing? For the other currencies that are missing, like fleet currency, like cantina currency, like the galactic war currency, those are all shard shop currency things. You're going to build towards shard shop currency when you have nothing else to spend there. Obviously, your fleet currency, first and foremost, is Zetas, and the majority of players are not ever going to hit the point where they have every Zeta available to them. So they are going to be applying and gaining Zetas every single time they're in that store. Once you have hit that point where you have every single Zeta, and once you have a hoard that is big enough for your account, some players are choosing to just hoard the currency. Some players are choosing to do shard shop currency. Personally, I am choosing to use that energy on Zetas, even though I have plenty, just because I have an inkling and an expectation that they may come in handy in the future. So, once again, all of that said, I hope that you find this helpful. The infographic itself will be on our Discord. It will be posted on Reddit. I am going to try and put a QR code in there as well for the ability to kind of look at this video for people who need it. And if you have found this video to be helpful, please do not forget to subscribe because, yes, it does help me out significantly and it does tell me what type of content you guys are interested in seeing from me. So, peace out and have a great rest of your day.